Hi, this is Dr. Mitzi Vargas, your host of the Pet Healer Podcast. And today we're going to continue our conversation about skin allergies and skin disease in dogs and cats. And we talked a little bit about comfort therapies or other things that we can do, for the skin, allergy testing, some drugs and everything else, including bathing, including, limiting exposure to known pathogens. Um, but today, and I hope I can engage everybody today because it's a little bit difficult if you don't have any Chinese principles in mind. We're talking about wind today because itch is actually defined as wind in Chinese medicine. Where there is wind, there is itch. And so wind combines, it combines with heat, it combines with damp. So they can have a good old party and have all of them. So again, I'm going to talk about using Chinese herbals, which herbals to use and when. So the formulas that are talking about, they're going to have a couple of jobs. They're going to clear inflammation, right? They're going to detoxify, means get rid of those pathogens. They're going to calm that wind, clear it, calm it, clear it, do something. And they're going to nourish the blood. And why the blood? Because the blood will kill the wind. The blood has the ability to kill the wind. And so most of these formulas will have at least one or two ingredients that does that nourishes the blood, invigorates the blood, or cool down the blood, but has something to do with blood because of that, like that relationship. That's the enemy of wind is blood. And it's obviously our helper. So the first formula I want to talk about is wind toxin. And wind toxin is indicated when there's a lot of skin itch and allergy disease, but the animal's really restless. And I look at the tongue, and it has to be red or purple. Red, obviously, is more to the gene deficiency side of things, and the pulses are usually superficial and fast. Um, so in that case, a red tongue that is flat, the animal's restless, is the body's hot, is itching, definitely could have wind heat. Um, so two pathogens, wind and heat. So to alleviate that itch, we need to detoxify the animal. And there is a formula that is a classic Chinese formula, uh, Shao Feng San, and that comes from 1345. Can you imagine? Thousands of years, 1,000 years ago almost, we have this formula that it was for itch and wind. Feng, Feng, means wind in Chinese, so or relates to wind in Chinese. So when you see that, I call it Feng, but it's pronounced, I think, Feng. Um, Basically, when you see it in a formula, you know it has to do something with itch. And wind toxin I use, and this patient that comes to me with a hot spot, we call it hot spot. It's acute moist dermatitis, right? It's an area that people tell me it wasn't there yesterday. I believe you, client, because oftentimes they weren't there yesterday. Oops, little mishap with this. Little mishaps happen, but we're here. So I was saying that. Can you cut that part? Because it's like.
Take a second.
So the wind toxin is really good for those hotspots. In Florida, we have them starting in March, all the way till September. They're gonna come in. The animal's extremely painful. That's a pain 4 out of 4. Okay, you touch it, they scream, they try to bite you, and the first line of defense is to clip the hair. And of course, sometimes we even have to sedate the pet because it's so painful to cut the hair. I often do an injection of buprenorphine, which is like the cousin of morphine, and then do some topical lidocaine or something like that, and then just shave the area. But oftentimes we have to use a sedative called dexdomitor, which you use and you can reverse, but you use it, and then once the animal is sedated, you clip immediately, clean, do what you need to do, and immediately reverse it. So the pet, comes, walks out of it, and can be done during the office visit, oftentimes. But that is necessary because it's extremely painful. But that's my call, that I have damp heat in there, but it's just a spot. It just came all of the sudden. So it's the conquering of the wind into the skin. But it does have damp in it and heat in it. And it's so hot that the hair around it, it starts, expands under the hair. So expands under the hair. So once you clip it, you see the extent. It's often like the tip of the iceberg. You only see a little spot, but once you shave it, you see how big it was or where it was starting to move. And if you don't do it, it can cover the whole dog. I've seen such things. And so that's not pleasant to see, and that's very, very distraught. An animal is very distraught, and is very painful for me to see an animal in such a misery. And wind toxin is the one that I would give, because it has certain things that I like. It has Baishan P, dictamos, and that clears damp heat and kills parasites too. But it just clears the damp heat. I love Le de Borella Fang Fun does clear the wind. That's a very important one. And of course, we're gonna have Peony Chi Shao, cool down the blood. And Kushan Osophora detoxifies and alleviates itching. There's another formula I really like. It's called Kushan Siwu, and I use it for mange and really bad pyodermas associated with either ringworm or either scabies or anything like that. But for hot spots, wind toxin is the best one. Okay, another formula. And again, I don't get paid anything by Jingtang, which is the company that makes these formulas here in the Florida. I just use them because they're so easy to use. They're very economical, and they're made here in Florida. So I feel I'm supporting my homies, when I'm buying from something that was done here in Florida. And of course, this is a company founded by my mentor, Dr. Shea, which I admire tremendously. And I'm eternally grateful for teaching me TCVM. So, I mean, it kind of like works for me. But that's what I'm trying to say. If there's a classic formula, I'll mention it so that you can look it up, do your Google search, and buy it from wherever you can, right? External wind is another one that I use, and that's just wind heat, but no dermatitis, basically. This is the red dog. They come in and they're just pink from tip of the ears to tip of the tail, all pink, super itchy, but you don't see any fleas, you don't see any infection anywhere. It's just extremely restless and just super hypersensitive. You touch them and they start itching. Um, so what I do with that, I that's more of a clear wind one, just mainly itch, but also some heat. But it doesn't have any dampness with it. So you can use peony again because it cools but a different one, the Chi Shao Jiao, because it cools the blood and clears the heat. But mainly something like Bombix Jiangkan, it clears the wind and detoxifies. And so Mutan also, it cools the blood and activates the blood. So those are really good ones. They immediately um, control the itch. And there are some good scientific terminology and that I'm not gonna get into, but there's some studies that prove that it inhibits the production of IgE and inhibits the release of histamine. So they've studied this in vitro and everything, and so definitely it really improves the immune response, increases it. So that's a very good formula. And I use this on all those white dogs. For my poor Uli gets external wind occasionally, especially March to April is his worst season. And I do a cytopoint and I put him on external wind. And that usually takes care of it. His next season, sadly, is usually September to October. And we do the same. So I manage him pretty good with external wind. And he's a white German Shepherd, so of course recessive and sensitive and white. So very the skin is usually more sensitive to allergens. And so the damp heat skin is another formula that I use. That's when you see a lot of lesions in the skin, like papules and eczema. There's a lot of bad smell in the skin. The skin even thickens, and it has like even a darkening of the skin because it is so chronic and it is so itchy. It's usually not as painful as like a hot spot, and is not as itchy as external, just a clear wind heat or external wind, but it's just really miserable. It stinks of chronicity and misery. And so there is a classical antecedent for damp heat skin. It's called Kinchi Retang, and it's a modification of that classical herb formula. But what it does is clears the damp and the heat and detoxifies and cool the blood. It uses different herbs than the other ones, and some of them are, clear damp heat and benefit the skin is kochia, which is Difuji or G. Difuji. Those are That's one of the herbs that it uses, and it definitely helps to clear the skin. So I have several dogs on damp heat skin right now because the summer is they're just getting really severe pyodermas and complicated with yeast also. So I do shampoo therapy for the damp heat skin problems and the damp heat skin formula. And the damp heat skin formula has drivers. What that I mean is, if your problem is not all over, but it's only on the paws, I've seen that it's only the paws. There's also, a specific formula that has drivers that gets that area, and they're called for that paws damp heat. And if it's only on the belly, then lower jaw damp heat. So there are modifications to the formula. They keep adding drivers or those herbs that go to specific areas of the body. And so those are very useful because then it's a more targeted approach. And so it tends to have better results. So these are the herbs that I use here. I also, Chinese wise, obviously do acupuncture, and I also do food therapy. So most of the food therapy would be not based on the constitution, but based on my treatment principle. My treatment principle is to nourish the blood and to cool the skin. So those are my main principles. And sorry, I just have some little things in here that I wanted to share. So the food therapy. So when it comes to the energies of food, I would usually use to cool the blood. I would use cool foods like turkey and dog egg and cod and crab and clam. And clam water is an easy one to add to the water, and it kind of calms down that itch as well. But I definitely deal with the proteins mainly. Just do the proteins, and that will really help. And then neutral foods will be pork, beef, salmon. Stay away from chicken and venison, shrimp, and I don't know, all of those things that are very hot. Ham, that's not good. So those are good things to keep in mind. But those formulas, in addition to the food, in addition to an occasional acupuncture, please, and the comfort therapies, are going to be part of the multimodal approach here at Orchid Springs Animal Hospital, and probably at the offices of most of my colleagues that are practicing integrated medicine. I hope that you learned something, that maybe you listened and heard something you haven't heard before, or that you had doubts about, and maybe I was able to clear some doubts for you. That will be wonderful. It'll make me sleep really good at night, knowing that I helped somebody. So if I did, please send me an email, send me a comment, um, share, subscribe, help me advance this cause, which is making TCVM or integrated medicine normal, a normal day-to-day thing that you can get at any veterinarian. There's 80,000 plus veterinarians in the United States, and only about 6,000 practice this type of medicine. So I want to see this go huge. So with your help, demanding, if you're a client, demanding this kind of care, and if you're a colleague, just getting interested in learning, I will definitely help more animals by doing that. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.